We're going to be looking this session at dealing with Maya, dealing with things, behavior, thoughts, feelings, etc. that are not favorable to our Krishna consciousness. And this is going to be another interactive work, a fun shop. So I'm not going to just sit up here and entertain all of you. Do be prepared to participate. The main participation that's going to be required here is individual. So if you do not have something to write on and something to write with, you most definitely need to do that. I have extra blank pieces of paper here, and we should have some pens and pencils. So is there anyone who needs paper? Okay. So this is blank paper down at the bottom here. Don't use all of them because we'll want some for the other seminars. And there's pens here, Prabhu. If you don't have enough pencils. Most of what you're going to be doing here, as I said, is individual. It's also confidential. No one else is going to look at it but you. If you yourself don't have any problems in your life, then you can write down some things that you experience other people have problems with that you could help them with. Okay? So if you're coming here not for yourself, but you're coming here to help others, then you'll need to write down. You can just stick that on the top right now. What are you looking for? No, that's not for here. That's not for now. That's for tomorrow. What you need? Oh, one of those handouts. Are they all gone?
No, they're on the back chair right by the entrance.
Yeah, if you didn't get one of the handouts for this seminar, they're on the back chair there. Okay. You can also obviously write on the back of that. Yes. Yes, we have extra pens. Does anyone else need one? One request with these pens is, yeah, please. So just before you leave, just put it back here in the table so we'll have them for tomorrow's and Sunday session. Is that okay? Obviously, you can take the paper with you. I have some more pens. Anybody else need a pen? Anybody else? Pen? Okay. So this morning, we looked at how to find all the aspects of our life spiritually enlivening. We were looking at the non-sadhana aspects of our life and how we could see those as service and feel spiritually enlivened by them. So today we're going to be, now at this session, we're going to be looking at aspects of our life that are not sadhana and not service that we want to jettison. So we're looking at the parts of our life that we would like to get rid of or transform in some way. Tomorrow morning, we're going to be looking at scheduling and prioritizing. So how to arrange our life so as to have time for sadhana and particularly to have time for high quality sadhana. So that's going to be tomorrow morning. Tomorrow afternoon, we're going to be looking at how we can have an awareness of Krishna, consciousness of Krishna in everything that we do. And again, there we're going to be looking at primarily non-sadhana time, although we're going to look at a little bit of quality sadhana tomorrow morning, both quantity and quality. And then tomorrow afternoon, how we can become Krishna conscious, aware of Krishna in the non-sadhana parts of our life, which is a little different from what we looked at this morning. This morning we were looking at our attitude, seeing things as service, seeing ourselves as a servant. And tomorrow afternoon, it's more really just seeing Krishna there. So they're related, but they're looking at it from a different angle. And then on Sunday, we're going to be doing, Sunday is going to be a little different. Sunday is going to be a bit more of a meditative seminar. We have music and songs and on the processes of surrender. So these four today, the two today and the two tomorrow, we've organized according to 6 of the 8 principles of Ashtanga Yoga, as we mentioned this morning. And what we're going over today is particularly touching on these, yam, niyam, dharana, and dhyana. So in order to get rid of the impediments in our lives, the things in our lives that keep us from Krishna, we're going to be looking not only at yam, niyam, what should we do and what should we not do, but also a similar principle to what we looked at this morning with who we are and what we actually want to be. So what is Maya? Maya is the illusion that causes us to see things as separate from Krishna. And Maya is Krishna's energy, which is really fascinating, actually, that it's Krishna's energy that allows us not to see Krishna. So the irony of that is even when we're doing, thinking, or saying things that pull us away from Krishna, it's only Krishna's energy and Krishna's mercy which allows us to do that. Isn't that interesting? Krishna says, Matasmatir Jnana Apohanam Cha, I also give forgetfulness. So during the times that we forget Krishna, Krishna is there allowing us to forget him. Isn't that weird? So when we're talking about Maya, we're saying activities, behaviors, thoughts, feelings, speaking, body, mind, words, that make us think, I am this body. Something that solidifies our identity as this body. And any activities which induce us to see the world as separate from Krishna. Right? This morning we talked a lot about how to see the world as connected with Krishna. But there are certain activities, certain ways of thinking, certain ways of speaking, certain ways of thinking that tend to produce this idea of separateness. Yes, you understand? Okay. Then there are certain activities that make our heart very hard-hearted. There's things we can say, things we can do that put our mind in a situation, our emotions in a situation. So we looked at thinking we're this body, getting on the platform that my happiness is in the happiness of the body, of just seeing things separately from Krishna, and then just like not being a nice person is what we're looking at here. Where we're just selfish and nasty and etc. Okay, what I'd like you all to do, again, this is confidential. No one else is going to look at it unless you want to show it to them. Hare Krishna. But this is confidential. I'd like you to make an honest list. I'd like you to make an honest list of what are the things that you are struggling with. And it shouldn't be something that, you just did one time 50 years ago or something like that. But if there's things that, whether it's, breaking the 4 principles or whether it's something more minor, whatever it may be, gossiping about other devotees perhaps, whatever level it may be, if you don't do this, you'll really just be an observer for the rest of the seminar. Because this is things that impede your spiritual life. Anything you're doing that's separating you from Krishna. Whether it's, I'm drinking coffee in the morning, I'm playing computer games 6 hours a day, I yell at my kids, I spread rumors about devotees, I don't clean my house. Whatever. And as I say, if you don't do this right now, then then this will not be a participatory seminar for you. So that you're welcome just to be an observer. I'm not requiring participation. However, if you do this, you will get the most out of the seminar. If you don't have anything like that in your life, if your life is already totally pakka, and you never do anything wrong, then you can make a list of things that other people do, and you can use what we're going over in this seminar as a way of finding ways that you can advise and help them. Is that okay? That you'll find something here that will help you. And we're going to be giving very practical and a wide variety of practical solutions. First, we're going to look at the causes. So we have this list of problems, things that are impeding our Krishna consciousness, things that we know are spiritually wrong and harmful for us, or you could also put on that list, again, things that other people have come to talk to you about that may not be your personal problems. And our question is, and of course this was Arjuna's question also, is, why do we say, and think things, speak things that we know are wrong, that we know are harmful to ourselves? And this is, of course, a problem among materialistic people also, that they want to give up smoking and they smoke anyway, and they want to go on a diet and they eat cake. And, it's a general human problem that we have certain ideals that we want to achieve. And we know what we need to do to achieve those ideals, and we know what hinders us from achieving those ideals. And yet we still do the things, or say, or whatever the things, that make it hard for us to achieve them. So one cause is other people. So some of the times we do wrong things because of other people. Here we're looking at other people in our work environment. So there may be people in our work environment who induce us to do things that are against our ideals. Yes? And I mean, this picture is a little extreme, but in certain parts of the world, drinking alcohol at work is really considered part of the job. And if you don't go out drinking, you basically can't keep your job. I've heard it's like that in Ireland and in Korea, that there's certain, it's just the norm. And it may not be as extreme as drinking alcohol, but I remember even when I was an assistant principal in a public school, and I was harassed by the principal that I was vegetarian. And there were 2 other teachers in the school who were vegetarian, but she actually harassed me. I would generally just bring my own food. I would generally just, cook something and bring my own prasadam. But at one time there was some big conference, and I thought it wouldn't exactly be very good that I'm opening up my own little plastic case, So I thought, okay, I'll just get some salad. And she was just harassing me the whole time. And I remember talking even to devotees. They say, there's a Christmas party and everything has eggs in it and there's all this alcohol and people are really harassing you. They're really, and it may be, again, something less than that. Maybe something not breaking the principles. So can you look at your list and see, is there anything there on your list where there's a problem with coworkers or anything with work? Maybe you just put a little W by that. Sometimes the problem at work is not what you're doing, but what you're selling, right? So I remember talking with one devotee who had a job in a convenience store, and he said, okay, we're selling alcohol, we're selling condoms, we're selling lottery tickets, and we're selling, meat. What should we do? I said, quit your job. We'll get to that at the end. But, so it may not be things you're actively doing, but it may be things that you're being pressured to participate in one way or the other. In fact, the devotee just asked me this 2 days ago. Someone who's out of a job, dipping into their savings, really looking for money and saying, oh, I was just offered this great job, but what it is trying to find a cure for a kind of pneumonia that cows get when they're packed up tightly being herded to slaughter. And the cause of the pneumonia is that they're being packed up tightly herded to slaughter, and they want me to help find a cure for it. Do you think I should take the job? So it can be something indirect. Do you understand? Okay. So next problem may be from family. Now this is something I hear all over the world, always, all the time. My family, I can say every week, at least once a week, I get an email or chat or some kind of conversation from somebody who's telling me that because of pressures from their family, it's hard for them to be Krishna conscious, that their family are pressuring them to do things and so forth that are in opposition to their Krishna consciousness. And this is true, by the way. Sometimes I think those of us who are not Indians think that this doesn't happen in Indian families, but that's not true. So it's just as much of a problem in Indian families as it is in non-Indian families. And sometimes it may not be, just pressure, hey, go to the movies with us, or, eat this thing. But sometimes it just may be this kind of pressure from families. You know, pressure where you don't have any time for your sadhana. You have to do this job and this study and this thing and this thing and this thing and this thing and this thing. And they're constantly pressuring you to act in a way that's opposed to your spiritual life. So if you can look at your list, and if there's anything there that has to do with family, if you can put an F by it. Yeah.
Can we really blame others? You know, it's really.
This is not a blame session. Yeah, actually, the whole idea of the session was we were just going to blame all these different groups. No, we're not blaming anybody. We're just trying to identify it would help us to find a cure, is to find out where's it coming from. The next might be friends. So I know when I first started practicing Krishna consciousness, I was a university student, and it was really hard with the other students. It was really, really hard with the other students. I remember when I turned 18, and the students, and they were nice girls. I mean, they were really nice girls. They were religious girls and everything, and I just didn't expect it from them. And they said, okay, now you're 18, you have to come with us to see an R-rated movie. And I said, no, I'm trying to practice Krishna consciousness. I don't want to see an R-rated movie. They said, oh, it's your 18th birthday, you have to. And they kind of pressured me and pressured me and pressured me. And finally I said, all right. Oh my God. First of all, they were terrible movies. They were just terrible movies. I can still remember them. I still remember what they were about. And that experience really pushed me to decide to move into the ashram. I thought, wow, I need to be with devotees. I can't just be here with the non-devotees. They were nice girls too. They weren't like bad girls. Hare Krishna. And now sometimes the friends may even be devotee friends. Okay, it's not all non-devotee friends who are pressuring you to go see some violent movie. It was about an axe murderer. Anyway, it's not just that. It can be devotee friends, and their maya can be more subtle. I mean, sometimes it might be gross. I was once in a temple, do not ask me where, please, because I will not tell you, where the temple president and vice president came up to my husband and I one morning and said, you're not really part of the devotee community. Why exactly? And, it finally came down to that we didn't go to the volleyball game. And then I said, was it a co-ed game? And they said, yeah. And I said, well, we don't play co-ed sports. And the vice president looked at the president and said, I told you so. That's why we didn't invite them. So, maybe the devotees. Maybe the devotees with something like that, or maybe the devotees with the most subtle of all maya. Do you know what so-and-so did? Oh, really? Did they do that? Yeah, you thought they were a good devotee, but actually they did this, and actually they did, oh, do you know about that? And what about this other thing? And, right? And my dear friends, if you don't know about it, you're lucky. But there are websites out there for this, okay? And I have met devotees, both virtually and physically, who have told me straight to my face, my service is to criticize the devotees in ISKCON. Seriously. So it may be that. It may be people who are inducing us to this kind of subtle thing, or people who are breaking our faith. People who are questioning our faith. They're breaking our faith in our spiritual authorities. They're breaking our faith in the process. Or somehow they're sowing seeds of doubt. And I've seen this a lot, where it's not that friends are inducing you to drink alcohol or go to R-rated movies, but they're presenting things in such a way that you start wondering, well, is there a God? And doing. So if you have anything here with friends, if you just put a D by that. Any of your problems that come from friends. Okay, and then we have ourself, our own mind. Maybe our own bad habits in the past, what we did when we were kids, or something like that before we took up Krishna consciousness, or just our own mind. There are bad habits and difficulties that really we can't blame anybody else. It's not coworkers, it's not family, it's not friends, it's ourself. That we're doing it to ourselves. So if we could just put an S by any of those that come from ourselves. So we're going to look at a variety of solutions, and we're going to start at the highest level of solution. I'm going to start at the highest level, the best, ultimate, total solution, 100% spiritual, and then we're going to go down and look at things that are partially spiritual and partially material, and then we're going to look at solutions that are ultimately material. I want to look at a range of things. Obviously, the only ultimate final solution for all of our Maya is fully spiritual. However, sometimes some difficulties can be solved just by adjusting things materially. So we will look at that as well as combinations. So I want to tell you that I'm going from highest to lowest, because if any of you say, oh my God, this stuff is way too high for me, we will go down. But I was looking at, should I go low to high or high to low? You know, anyway, decide to go high to low. So our first solution is sadhu sanga. That is the absolute top solution. And I will admit to all of you that until the last few years of my life, I think for me sadhu sanga was mostly something I accepted in principle, that I didn't really get it. I mean, I did understand when I was in college that I needed the association of devotees and not the association just of the other materialistic students. But all the talk in the Shastra and from our acharyas about sadhu sanga, right? Sadhu sanga, Sharva Shastra Koi, Lava Macha Sadhu Sanga, Sarva Siddhi Hoy. I took as hyperbole. I mean, I didn't say that because I'm an official card-carrying member of the Hare Krishna movement, but in my heart, I took it as hyperbole. And I thought, well, I don't know. And I think for two reasons. First of all, I found the association of the other members of the Hare Krishna movement to be a mixed bag. Can I say that? Recorded? You know, so I really found it to be mixed. I found some of it to be enlivening, and some of it to be not enlivening, and some of it to be neutral. And I didn't find that much association that I thought was that powerful. And it's really only been in the past few years that I've found some devotees that just have acted as jet fuel for my spiritual life. And I've seen, wow, if you get the right association, everything changes. Just everything. Now, but it's got to be the right association. And we are, just like Srila Prabhupada told Jamuna Dintarane, he said, if you have 2 people that are compatible, you'll make advancement, and 200 that are not compatible, nobody makes any advancement. So we are told to find sangha that is compatible with us. Now, of course, we should associate with more advanced people to serve them and less advanced people to help them. But I'm talking here particularly about on the friend level, on the equal level. Because I found this to be the greatest cure for any kind of Maya at all. To have people who really encourage you in your spiritual life, because you're at similar levels and you're going through some of the same things together, and people that you share your realizations with. I'm part of a little group where we actually have never all met each other on a physical level. So I've met all of them, and some of them have met each other, but the whole group hasn't. Not everybody has met everybody. So we just associate electronically. And the basic principle of our group, Hare Krishna, the basic principle of our group is that it's only Krishna Katha. That's it. So we share quotes from Shastra, we share our realizations, sometimes we share some difficulty or question that we're going through. We do not talk about our kids and husbands and sicknesses, and we just don't. I mean, sometimes we might say, I have to visit the family for a week, I'm sorry, I won't, be active very much. But we don't talk about that part of our life at all. We just don't deal with that identity. We just deal with the Jivera Swarupaya Krishnera Nityadasa identity. We certainly don't talk about any kind of management or anything going on in the devotee society like that at all. Like, not at all. And I found the group to be just so enlivening and so exciting. It's the first thing I look for every day is, did anybody post anything? And I try to post something, and just a little quote. Okay, this is what I read today in Nectar Devotion. This is what I read in the Bhagavatam. And I've never had such an amazing impetus for my spiritual life as having just, I think there's 5 of us in this group, just a little group of devotees like that. And I've been members of lots and lots and lots of little group of devotees. But it was usually, okay, we're going to write this scholarly paper, we're going to do something like this. And I really found it to be absolutely amazing. The other kind of sadhu sangha that I found to be very helpful for me are people who are more advanced than me and who I will take correction from. So people who I will take correction from. I was speaking to one senior devotee some time ago who said some things that I found very disturbing. And I asked this devotee, do you have anyone in your life from whom you are willing to take correction? And it was kind of a back and forth. And finally this person said to me, well, no, I don't have a living Shiksha guru. And I said, well, maybe you should think of getting one. So I found it very helpful to have somebody, 1 or 2, it doesn't have to be, 10 people, who I trust have my best interest at heart, someone who I trust is not envious of me, doesn't have any malice toward me, someone who actually knows me, so they're not just giving some kind of wild advice, out in the stratosphere, and someone who has some kind of insight and understanding that I don't have, and who's willing to correct me when I need it, and from whom I am willing to take correction. And what I found is the combination of those things, of having equals in friendship with whom we can discuss Krishna Katha, and having superiors from whom I am willing to take even very heavy chastisement. And actually take it, you understand? Not argue with it. And just even if it's really heavy, and even if I really don't like it, and even if when I first hear it, I completely disagree with it, I don't argue. And I sit down and I think about it and I pray on it, and 99.9% of the time I say, you're right. Thank you. And that kind of sadhu sangha I have just found to be extremely, extremely helpful. And of course there's a sadhu sangha in the books. There's a sadhu sangha with Srila Prabhupada, through his books, through his lectures. There's sadhu sangha with all the great devotees themselves are in the books, Sukadeva Goswami, Narada Muni, and so forth and so on. But having that association with devotees, it removes the desire for nonsense from the heart. It makes us feel, yes, Krishna consciousness is real, and I can do it, and Krishna will help me, and I don't want to do something that's an impediment to my Krishna consciousness. It changes our motives and our desires. And this, my friends, is true always. Always. As we go up through the levels of Krishna consciousness, when you get to spontaneous practice, from Vaidhi sadhana to Raganuga sadhana, the main difference in sadhana between Raganuga and Vaidhi is that in Raganuga you take shelter of a devotee who shares your mood of how to worship Krishna. So it's very devotee dependent. At Vaidhi sadhana, you're general taking shelter of the devotees, Raganuga, very specifically so. And if you read the song Sri Rupa Manjari Pada, how many of you are familiar with that song? So Sri Rupa Manjari Pada is written with such a mood of love to Rupa Manjari. Intense mood of love and surrender. And this is what's happening on the spiritual world. That it's not just that it's just me and Krishna. It's me and Krishna and the devotees. And everyone's a devotee. The cows are devotees, the blades of grass are devotees, the flowers are devotees. One devotee was saying to me the other day, the clothes in the spiritual world are alive. When I first put on a sari, actually I first put on a sari when I was 9, but when I first put on a sari in the temple, and we didn't have real saris in those days. They just bought long pieces of polycotton cloth, and all of us unmarried women wore saffron. And at least the temple where I joined, they said the more pleats you had, the more chaste you were. So we had like 25 pleats from here to here. And it was this heavy fabric. It was tucked in like this much. So it was dragging on the floor. We had this constant gray border, and it was very hard to keep on. I remember I'd pin it with a safety pin here, and it would ride up like this. It was really, really, really hard to keep on. So I remember thinking, though, I'm so Vedic. But this devotee was saying to me how in the spiritual world the clothes are alive. And so, as you're moving, they're voluntarily moving with you. And I thought, wow, that is just so totally cool. Wouldn't that be cool? I had living clothes that were also a devotee. Your clothes are a devotee. Actually, it's really funny because sometimes we talk about devotional clothing, and I'm not, Hare Krishna. I don't know, my clothing isn't very devotional. But in the spiritual world, it's actually devotional. Your clothing has some devotion. So my point is, in the spiritual world, we have this sanga with the devotees. Everything's a devotee. So this principle, it's not just like, okay, you have to hang out with the devotees, but it's operating always. And Rupa Goswami is explaining that one of the causes of rasa with Krishna is this vibhav. And the vibhav, the stimulus to rasa, it starts with Krishna as the enjoyer, and the devotee as the repository of the relationship with Krishna. So that's the first thing is sadhu sanga. And if we're struggling with something and we don't have good sadhu sanga, get good sadhu sanga. I don't know how to get it. Ask Krishna. It sounds simplistic, but it's true. Really say to Krishna, I'd like some good sadhu sanga. It doesn't have to be physical and geographical. It does not have to be physical and geographical. My most enlivening sangha is not in physical proximity most of the time. Okay, now this is something we talked about this morning, and this is our identity. So we talked about it this morning in a different context, but the same principle applies here. That why are we doing things opposed to our Krishna consciousness? Because we have the wrong identity. I'm thinking I am this, I am that, I am the other thing, and therefore, if I'm this, then that's what I'm going to do to be happy. I'm a teenage boy, therefore I should play video games to be happy. That's what teenage boys do. It's ultimately we have an identity problem. So if we think, I am Krishna's servant, what should Krishna's servant be doing with their time? Would Krishna's servant be gossiping? Would Krishna's servant be binge-watching television shows? Would Krishna's servant be eating, the 10th piece of cake? Would whatever it may be, is this appropriate for Krishna's servant? So to change our identity, and changing our identity requires really good sadhana, which we'll talk about tomorrow morning. But in order to change our identity, to really understand, I am a soul, I am Krishna's servant. But it's a good thing we can say, well, who am I? Why do I think this thing is going to give me pleasure? Who do I think I am? If I really understand that I'm a soul, would this give me pleasure? Okay, I'm a soul. As a soul, is this something? No. I personally found this to be very helpful in certain cases. I don't know if I should say this or not. How much to say? Okay, we'll risk it. So when I was 14, I fell in love with a boy in my art class, and he didn't love me in return. Thank you, Krishna. Thank you, Krishna. He never loved me in return. I mean, he was like friendly. But anyway, I fell in love with him, and it's just, I don't know. I think I would have jumped off the edge of a cliff for this guy. If you ask me why I fell in love with him, I have no idea. So even after I joined the movement, I still sometimes would think about this guy. And it just got so irritating. It was really irritating. Like, why am I thinking about this guy? And so one time I looked at a picture and I said, Krishna, you're Madan Mohan. You can take this away. And then I understood something. I understood this is just biology. It's not you. You were 14. If you had lived 100 years ago, you would have been married at 14. And I thought it's just like little birds. Little birds. You know about little birds? When they get out of the egg, whatever's the first large moving object they think is their mother? Yeah? You've heard about that, right? So it's like it just happened to be the first good-looking boy you saw when you were 14. And it was like, that's the one. And once I got that, once I was like, oh my God, it's just biochemicals. It's not me. And then it was gone. It was just gone. And it had bothered me and it was just gone. It was just gone, never came back. So sometimes it's this thing of identity and just saying, oh, it's just biochemicals. I was talking with a devotee recently who was going through some trauma with her family, that one of her kids was really going through a hard time. And she just said, I'm just losing my Krishna consciousness, and I'm so upset, and I'm always in anxiety, and I'm yelling at people, and I'm just trying to stop it. And I said, instead of trying to stop it, why don't you just observe it and say, oh, as a mother, naturally I feel this way. And just say, oh, that's interesting. Those are mother feelings. And distance yourself from it. I'm the soul. I'm the observer of these mother feelings. I said, don't either grab them or try to destroy them. Just watch them. Be like the ocean where the rivers flow into the ocean that doesn't get disturbed. And she wrote me back the next day. She said, wow. She said, it's no longer bothering me. She said, once I stopped trying to control it, you understand? Once I stopped trying to control it and I just observed it, it went away by itself. So many times we have an identity problem where in our particular material identity we're trying to grab something. If the way we try to get rid of it is to push it away, that's still within that identity. Go to the observer, go to the soul platform, look at it and say, oh, that's just the material identity. And many times you'll find it's very easy to give something up. Okay, now this we've heard all the time, and I'm sorry if you're going to say, I've heard that all the time, Urmila, and I really don't want to hear it again. However, for the sake of completeness, we will also mention this one. It is called Get a Higher Taste. Yeah, sure, Urmila, get a higher taste, whatever. But it's true. So Srila Prabhupada, the Nectar Devotion in the preface, one of my favorite parts of Srila Prabhupada's books, something that I've read more times than I can count, and I could probably read it for the rest of eternity. He talks about how everything that we're doing is motivated by a desire for rasa. That everything we're doing is motivated by a desire for pleasure. Now, what I'm about to suggest that you do is going to be what we call very counterintuitive. It's just like what I mentioned last time about identity things. And you don't want to either grab them or push them away. What we tend to do with identity problems, with Maya that comes from an identity problem, is try to repress it. But you don't want to do either. You want to observe it. And you want to see what it is. And as soon as you observe it and see what it is, it goes away. So most people don't want to do, actually a number of the things I'm going to be teaching you today are things that people just naturally resist. So you're probably not going to want to do this, but I'm telling you, it really, really works. Now, each of these things are going to work for different things, and as I said, we're kind of moving down here. You have to figure out why you actually enjoy the thing that you're doing that you don't want to do. Okay? See, what we usually do is with the things we don't want to do, we tell ourselves that we don't enjoy them. We tell ourselves that we don't like them. Be doing them. Why do we resist this? because we don't want to admit that we're enjoying something that's harming ourselves. That's a very, 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 very difficult thing to do. It requires something very odd called humility. and a rather substantial dose of it. You know, I am getting pleasure from doing something that is harmful to myself. That's weird, isn't it? I mean, isn't that weird? Isn't that strange? How could I be getting pleasure out of doing something that's harming myself? And it may be harming others. I may also be getting pleasure out of doing something that's harming others. It may be harming my relationship with them. It may be harming me and them in my relationship with them. And the way we present things to ourselves is, no, I'm not enjoying this. I'm doing it for other reasons. I'm doing it because of circumstances. I'm doing it because, a bad habit, but I really don't like it. But that's not true. If I'm doing, whatever we're doing, anything, I don't care what it is. What we're thinking, what we're feeling, what we're saying, what we're doing, every single thing we're doing is motivated by a desire to enjoy. Everything. Everything. At least we're hoping it's going to give us pleasure. It may not give us pleasure, but we're hoping it will give us pleasure. You understand? Like sometimes you eat something hoping you'll enjoy it and you don't. But that doesn't mean that wasn't your motive. Yes? You follow? Okay. Why did I go see those R-rated movies? I was hoping that I would have, actually the pleasure I was looking for there was friendship. You follow? I was thinking I was going to enjoy a rasa of friendship with these girls. Yes? I didn't. I actually ended up being angry at them, and I hated the movies. So I didn't enjoy that rasa, but that was my intention. Okay, so what are the rasas? Anyone tell me what the rasas are? Passive. So neutral. Neutral is like awe and respect. And the next one? Serving. Helping. Right? Feeling useful. What's the next one? Friendship. Next one? Parental. That's anytime we're doing any kind of caring, helping, but from a superior position. So serving, we're helping from an inferior position. Parental, we're helping, but from a superior position. Okay, and the next is, of course, romantic. Then the secondary rasas, they are chivalry. Chivalry has 4 parts, by the way. And what else? Ghastliness. What else? Humor. It's also joy. Ghastliness is also disgust. Chivalry is like sportsmanship. A sense of being righteous. And charity. And one more I can't think of right away. Okay, the next one. Anger. Well, fear. What else? There might be some of that in the chivalry and the righteousness. There's a dharma vira. I'm very dharmic. I'm doing the right thing. Yeah. Wonder. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. One more. Compassion. And also, this is also like sadness. Now, again, these are all pleasurable, even the seemingly negative ones. So ghastliness and disgust, somebody might say, oh, this smells terrible, oh, let me smell, right? Also, when we're morally disgusted by someone else's behavior, a lot of the news is this ghastliness. This politician did this corrupt thing, and this movie star did that morally repugnant thing, and people go, yeah. They're enjoying that rasa. Horror movies are like that. Humor, joy, comedy, that's what we normally think of as happiness. Anger, it's why people go to political rallies. It's why one of the big reasons why people watch sports, more watching sports than playing sports. Some of the chivalry will also be into watching sports. But a lot of that, anger. I mean, if you're ever around people who watch sports, you just like you're in the house, and there's nobody there. It's just them and the TV, and they'll be like, yeah, well, why did you call that play? Do you really think the guy on the TV can hear you? But that's an enjoyment, where people, whatever, rallies, protests people get into. Fear and suspense. So, roller coaster rides and scary movies and extreme sports. Wonder, watching the sunrise over the mountain and seeing people do acrobatics 10 layers high and things like that. Compassion and sadness. So, again, people like to see sad movies, yes? Was it a good movie? Oh, it was great. With chivalry, again, the feeling of sportsmanship, of an equal, fair, friendly fight. Giving in charity is also a kind of chivalry, and also, acting heroic. Right? So all of these exist with Krishna, and whenever we are everything we're doing in this world is some desire to enjoy some combination of these. So let's do an example together, and then you can look at your own list. So I just mentioned some things. So we just talked about, let's say, anger, right? So people are going to political rallies or watching sports games in order to feel angry. Anger is a rasa. They may also get a rush of anger by yelling at their spouse or yelling at their kids, right? Which is a lot worse than yelling at the referee on the television set. So how could they experience that? So what you have to do is look at that. So, if your problem is that I'm yelling at my kids, if that's one of your problems, or I'm yelling at my spouse, and you say, well, I don't enjoy yelling at my spouse. I don't enjoy yelling at my kids. I just get so frustrated. No, you're actually enjoying the anger of yelling at your kids. Do you understand what I'm saying? Okay? Again, this is a very hard thing to admit. We really do not want to admit it. Okay, I'm talking about anger. I'm not talking about normally you say, hey, you can't hit your brother over the head with a fire truck, go stand in the corner. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about when you actually get angry. You understand? Yeah.
So the whole category of category weakness of heart. So basically there isn't such a thing. We're deriving pleasure.
Well, the weakness of heart is trying to derive pleasure out of something in which there is no pleasure. The material perverted rasas do not actually have any pleasure in them. Even the humor and joy, even, you're feeling compassion at the poor starving child, and so you give some charity, and then your heart is moved. It's not actual pleasure. Why is it not actual pleasure? All these things done on the material platform are essentially what? Sorry, this is so heavy. Maybe we should all just stop now. I don't know. Don't hate me, please. I'm talking about other people. We'll do it that way, okay? This doesn't have anything to do with anybody in this room, just other people who are not here. Because I'm not going to say this about any of you. So when somebody out there when they're doing that, well, what is it really about? Who's it really about?
Well, I mean, I'll talk about myself. I don't mind. But as you're listening to those things, I can see how, like the anger, for instance. When I get angry, I'm making myself right. I'm driving pleasure out of, look how right I am.
Yes.
I'm standing up.
Yes.
I can see that. My question is, like, for instance, the anger. What about, like, learned behavior? You know,
Well, we'll get to that.
okay.
We'll get to that. Hopefully. It's 5 o'clock. Should be able to get to that. So all these things, yes, they're all essentially about my false ego. Every single one of these. Now, some of them, even materialistic people, will tend to say, yeah, that's probably about your ego. And other ones, they'll say, well, that's not about your ego. They're all about our ego. They're all about, you know, I'm trying to be happy, often at someone else's expense in some way. And about how I'm great and I'm the center. None of that is real pleasure at all. What happens is, Prabhupada says, seeing the naked form of material desires. What happens as you advance in Krishna consciousness is you start seeing these things for what they are. I mean, as a crude example that I think none of us here do, so it's a safe thing to bring up, is something like meat eating, where people are getting happiness at the pain of another living being. They're deriving happiness from eating the body of some being who died in pain and suffering. And so they're directly getting happiness off of that living entity's suffering. And it's a very ghastly kind of happiness. You know, but they don't see it like that, do they? They're not thinking, wow, I'm enjoying at being the indirect, in most cases, instrument of the pain of another living being. Because that's the whole definition of evil. If you want to say, what's evil? Evil would be, I'm getting pleasure at someone else's suffering. And ultimate evil is I'm getting pleasure at being the instrument of someone else's suffering. That's ultimate evil. But frankly, that's what every conditioned soul is doing, more or less. Like Prabhupada said, you can steal a diamond, you can steal a cucumber, but you're still a thief. So even if my pleasure is, I'm right, and you're wrong, and I just made you grovel. You know, it's not as bad as slitting somebody's throat, obviously. But it's the same principle. So karmically, it's very different. Karmically, if I get pleasure from killing people, and karmically, if I get pleasure from showing you how wrong you are and how right I am, the karmic reaction is vastly different. But the spiritual reaction is pretty much identical. Which is why the great devotees will say things on the most sinful of all sinners. You know, you read that and you're thinking, what? What did you do? You didn't do anything. But it's that basic principle. So weakness of heart means I'm taking pleasure where there's no pleasure. I'm looking for pleasure in something that is actually revolting. And like the spiritual form of the ghastly humor, the ghastly rasa, is exactly that. If any of us have ever honestly, really, not to be socially acceptable in the Hare Krishna movement, but if we've ever honestly, really seen any of our anartas and faults and felt really repulsed by it, just genuinely repulsed by it, and it's a kind of ecstasy. So if it's genuine, it actually has some ecstatic element to it, where you feel very, very close to Krishna, but you also feel very repulsed by this stuff. So that's the ghastly humor, which is mostly visible at the neutral stage of love of God. All right, so is this clear how it's weakness of heart? But until and unless we face the fact that I'm looking for pleasure in these things, it's very hard to give them up, because we're trying to give up the wrong thing in essence. If I don't admit I'm taking pleasure in them, then I think I'm trying to give up just a bad habit, or I'm trying to give up just something that I really don't want to do, and I'm not getting to the core of it. So if I get to the core of it, then I say, okay, I've got to find that pleasure in another way. I've got to find that pleasure in a positive way. So let's take the thing, we started with taking the thing about anger. What would be a positive way to experience the rasa of anger? There aren't many, by the way. if someone offends the devotees. Yes. Or if someone is offending God. Therefore, Srila Prabhupada, in talking about this theory that life comes from matter, this theory, this atheistic theory that matter all of a sudden became alive, he said, anyone who kicks out this theory will make me very happy. He said, you will advance in Krishna consciousness if you kick out this theory of life comes from matter. Well, if you're kicking something, there's some anger. So those who are propounding atheism, those who are hurting the devotees, and we shouldn't be angry, of course, at the people, but to hate the sin, not the sinner. So that's a use of anger. Yes? To denounce. Well, you have to be very careful with that, because denouncing wrong etiquette, you may end up becoming angry at devotees. So I don't think anger would be an appropriate rasa for that. Your appropriate rasa would be more compassion and friendship, or maybe parental, rather than anger. Because if you're getting angry at devotees just because they have wrong etiquette, you may end up being one of the offenders against the devotees, for which the actual devotees will get angry at you. And that probably isn't such a good idea. Let's pick one of these other ones. I mentioned about ghastliness, that the real ghastliness, we should feel ghastliness. We should feel an ecstasy. Please remember, these are all ecstasies, ultimately spiritually. We should feel an ecstasy of ghastliness looking at our own sins. How does it become an ecstasy? It has to be related to Krishna. It has to be related to Krishna. If I'm just looking at my sinfulness without relation to Krishna, it becomes depression. And it's self-centered. A mundane example of this, it's very simple. Just like let's say I offended you, and I really like you, and I really want to be friends with you again. So I understand how I offended you, and I come to you and I say, I am so sorry. So I'm feeling, if I'm actually sorry, if I'm not just saying it because my mother trained me to say I'm sorry. I'm sorry, can I get out of the corner now? If it's genuine, which means I actually see how I hurt you and how I hurt the relationship, then I'm having a ghastliness, a disgust at my own bad behavior in the context of a loving, friendly relationship with you. It's not like I'm just looking in the mirror and going, and I'm so fallen. You understand? Therefore, it's an ecstasy because it has a relationship with Krishna. Okay. So, can you give me an example of some kind of maya and what kind of rasa it would have? Someone give me an example? Can you give me an example of some kind of maya, some kind of problem, doesn't have to be one on your own list, and what rasa might be connected with that? Friendship. Okay, so going out with office colleagues, and you're eating things you're not supposed to be eating, or drinking things you're not supposed to be drinking, or maybe you're just talking about a bunch of nonsense and so forth. So that would be the rasa of friendship. So what would be a devotional way that you could get that same rasa with sadhu sanga? Okay? So what I'd like you to do is, you can just pick one if you want, but pick at least something from your list and try to identify what rasa or groups of rasas you're getting from that and what you could substitute for that. What Krishna conscious rasa could you substitute for that? Take one that's relatively easy, just for the sake of time. Now you can look at the other ones later. But take something from your list that you feel is relatively easy, and how could you substitute some devotional rasa for that? Okay, by being messy, what does that allow you to do? Well, what does it facilitate you doing something else? That you're not spending time picking up things and you're not spending time cleaning. Does it give you time to do something else that you're really enjoying? Yes. What? You don't have to say. Maybe it's that.
Well, I'll tell you what it is. It's work. My career.
Okay, then.
The less I have to do that, and then I get right on the computer and I get work.
Okay, so it may be here.
Yes, thank you. That is it, because I feel that my career is doing. I got it. Thank you.
It may be the Dharma Vira. Thank you for asking that question. Yes, sometimes it's a little subtle.
Well, and I think I trick myself, like it's chivalry, so I trick myself thinking this is a good thing. I'm being a good person. Or
Yes.
I'm prioritizing.
Yes, you've got it. What we do with this stuff is we rationalize how actually it's good. I'm not doing this for my own sense and mental pleasure. No, why would I do something like this? Oh, come on. What kind of person do you think I am? I wouldn't do that. I'm doing it for this reason, this reason, this reason, this reason. No, you're not. Yes.
I don't understand how that would shift the whole habit. I mean, are you getting at trying to get to the source of it?
Yes.
Shift it?
Yes.
So now is he going to go back home and clean up after because he can have this
Well, the way this usually works is once you see, and I'm giving you a list of solutions. I'm not telling you each of these solutions work for everything, okay? I would try different solutions for different things. What I find is once you see what's actually going on, you approach it in a completely different way. You remove the motivation for what you're doing. It just vanishes. It's just gone. Because once you see the motivation for what it is, you're like, I don't want to do that. The behaviorists call it changing the motivation. You see it, Prabhupada calls it seeing the naked form of material desires. The example that I always give is that of, in the Odyssey, Ulysses and his crew, when they were going back, and they passed by the island with the witches. You all know that story? So there were these witches, and they were called the sirens. That's where we get the English word sirens. And they would sing a song of bewilderment. They would sing an enchantment song. And anyone who heard this song, they wouldn't see witches on a desert island with human bones. They would see beautiful women on a tropical island. And they would go there, and then the witches would eat them. So Ulysses was warned about this, and therefore he told all of his sailors to plug their ears with wax. But he wanted to hear the song of the sirens. So he left his ears unplugged, and he said, tie me to the mast, and any orders I give while we're going past this island you should ignore. So the fact is that as soon as we put in the wax and we don't hear the siren song, our attraction for that Maya is immediately gone. As soon as you identify, if you can identify correctly, and to identify correctly almost always requires some help from the Supersoul, by the way, because the mind has been rationalizing and covering this thing up for a very long time. So there's definitely some help from God has to be involved here. Without some help from God, this is not possible. You can't do it just with a therapist. But once you identify what is that rasa that you're getting, then the whole thing immediately looks completely foolish to you. You look at it and say, I don't want to go on a desert island with a bunch of human bones and cannibals. It loses its oomph for you. You see immediately there's not actually any rasa there. But if you don't identify the rasa, you can't see that. Does that make sense? As long as I'm lying to myself and saying, you know, I don't really want to be this way. I'm not really getting any pleasure. It's not doing anything for me. Because then we're lying. And as soon as you're truthful, and oh, that's why I'm doing this. then you look at it, and but that I'm not actually getting that. It's not giving it to me. Yes.
If we're here in the first place because we want to be in control and more, how do we switch that to be
Well, that's the identity problem. She said that she is having a hard time going from wanting to be the Lord to being a servant because being a servant doesn't appeal to her. I think being a servant doesn't appeal to most of us. I have not yet met the parent who says to their kids, when you grow up, I want you to be a servant. I haven't met such parents. You know, all the pious Hindu families, how many of them tell their children to become servants? Any? No. They say be an IT specialist, right? But I want to be a musician. IT. You know, so I mean, this is our general tendency. We've replaced most of our servants with machines. So aim for one of the others if that bothers you. Aim for awe and reverence or friendship, and work from that first. Yes.
So one thing I wrote down is getting angry at my kids, sometimes shouting at them. I've been fooling myself into believing that I don't like that, but I'm having a hard time identifying which is
Okay, well, it's probably you're trying to enjoy the parental rus. That I'm helpful, I'm the guide, I'm the teacher. I should be respected. And also there is happiness and anger. There's a kind of enjoyment in anger. There's a kind of release of these chemicals in the body and the brain of a feeling of power and control. And there is. I mean, studies about anger show that generally we get angry when we feel threatened, and one of the threats to us are subordinates being insubordinate. We actually feel threatened by that. We feel that our ability, on an animalistic level, we feel that our ability to get resources for our very life is threatened if we don't keep our status in the hierarchy. We're social animals. So if ever somebody who's an equal or a subordinate is insubordinate or insulting, there's a tendency to want to defend ourselves like that. And there's definitely some happiness. I am powerful. You cannot insult me. There's something like that, but it's probably also mixed with this. With I want to be the helper. I want to be the guide. I know. Yes, and I do want to go on. Yes. Uh-huh. Okay. But that's not something bad. That's not something bad. We're talking about things that you shouldn't be doing. We're talking about how we're trying to enjoy false rasas and things that we shouldn't be doing. Not how you're getting some enjoyment from trying to please Srila Prabhupada by distributing his books even though they're hard. That's a real rasa. So if you're getting a real rasa from that, from it's hard to distribute books because it's hard to get people to stop, but still I'm doing it, then my guess is it's involving probably a little bit of chivalry, and maybe some compassion, or maybe some servant. You're not stopping them. But the fact that you're going out, you wouldn't be going out unless it's giving you something. So it may be giving you a feeling of friendship with the devotees. They expect me to go out, so I'm going out. There's just something that it's giving you, but that's a positive thing. You don't want to get rid of that. Yeah.
When I watch comedy videos,
Which is humor and joy, obviously.
it's my laugh, I enjoy.
Yes, that's humor and joy. Well, also, not only is it unreal, but comedy shows, what are we usually laughing at? Just other people's suffering, isn't it? Isn't it? I mean, think about it. Next time you watch a comedy show, if you can remember what you've watched. I mean, comedy shows there's a lot of physical humor. We think it's funny when people fall. Isn't that odd? Have you ever thought about that? That we laugh at scenes where people would normally be getting very hurt? Yes? You know, hopefully they're not actually getting hurt, but probably sometimes they do. Probably sometimes these physical comedians actually get hurt. And a lot of comedy is at somebody's expense. We're laughing at the politicians. You know, they may make it easy for us to laugh at them, but that's something else. But the fact is that we're laughing at them, how foolish they are. Or, you know, we're laughing at people's foolishness usually. You know, we're mocking others. And, okay, how could I get comedy and joy in some transcendental way? Is there some means for getting comedy and joy in some transcendental way? I personally find the nectar devotion a very how would you know, it's a comedic book? How would you say that about a book? It's a book of comedy. I don't know, there's so many of the stories in the Nectar Devotion that are really funny. You know, I'm reading it every morning before I do my puja, and sometimes I'm just like cracking up. I mean, it's really, really stories about Krishna and his associates. They're really, really funny. There's a lot of stories in Chaitanya Charitamrita. I find Nectar Devotion is the biggest source of comedy stories. And then we're laughing at, you know, our comedy is involved with Krishna and Krishna's devotees. Yes?
One thing I didn't understand is, like, you mentioned that if something is taken in contest with Krishna, it's just that rasa is different.
Yes. So if what I'm enjoying is giving pleasure to Krishna, if my enjoyment is in relationship to Krishna, then it's actual enjoyment. So a rasa in relationship. I want to go on because I have some other suggestions, and we could talk about just this for 2 hours, or 3, or 4. Okay, so here's the same kind of principle. You know, what are we trying, this is, of course, just gross senses rather than mind, but this concept that what am I trying to enjoy materially, let me replace it with some genuine spiritual enjoyment. In order to do that, you have to identify what material enjoyment you're getting out of it. Let me replace that with something genuine. Okay, now we're starting to go to things that are more mixed with material solutions. It's kind of a mixture. This is called train an incompatible behavior. Train an incompatible behavior. The first area we're going to look at this is devotional recreation. You know, if you're having a problem with mundane recreation, do some devotional recreation where you can't do the mundane recreation at the same time. Train yourself to do something where the bad habit cannot be done at the same time, or it's impossible to do both at once. All right, well, let's say, you know, you're getting angry at somebody, so at the times when you would get angry at them, instead smile at them or do something for them. Train a replacement behavior that doesn't allow the bad behavior to happen at the same time. Now, it can even be very similar. So when I was assistant principal in a public school, there was one kid who was driving his teacher crazy because every time a guest came to the classroom, he would jump out of his seat and disrupt the classroom to say hello. Hi, guest! You know, and every time a kid in the classroom had a problem, he would jump out of his seat and run over to their desk to help them. Even if, like, they broke their pencil, he'd jump out of his seat and run over to their desk and take their pencil and sharpen it. And the teacher thought that he had a very serious behavior problem. Really, 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 she really did. She was saying to him over and over again all day, I'm the one with the degree, I'm the teacher, sit in your seat. And she even called a parent-teacher conference that I also was invited to, and telling the parents the kid should get therapy and he should go. I said, you know, really all you need to do is train him how to be the official guest greeter and official helper. Train him in doing proper behaviors so that he will not be able to do the proper behaviors and the improper behaviors at the same time. You know, how to greet the guests, how to help the other students. So you want to train an incompatible behavior. If you're, you know, skipping part of the mantra, you say that part more loudly. Or you change the rhythm of your chanting. You know, you do something that makes the other behavior impossible. You substitute another behavior. You know, you're spending, you know, till 12 o'clock at night watching comedy movies. Go to the temple and have a bhajan. Go out and distribute food. Go out and distribute books. Take that time. Get out of the house so you don't have the TV there. Some behavior that makes it incompatible. And if you can take a behavior that gives you a similar kind of rasa, then that's even better. Okay, so here we're looking at we're going to look at 2 kinds of incompatible behavior. One is recreation. One is spiritual recreation. So some kind of spiritually enlivening activity you can do, that is a recreational type of activity. So Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita 6:17 that the yogi is temperate in recreation. So we are not opposed to recreation, if we're devotees of Krishna anyway, and we believe him. So we want recreation, some recreation activity. Well, what did Srila Prabhupada say that he did for recreation? Anybody know? Bhajan. Yes. So having some recreational, devotional recreational activity. If you don't have any, then maybe you need to add one. So I think in our modern society, almost all the recreational activities have become mundane. And they're not even very uplifting. Yes? It's really a shame. Then another incompatible behavior you can do would be a hobby. And a hobby is a little different from recreation because a hobby is almost like work, but it's work you're probably not getting paid for, but it might be work for somebody else. So some kind of hobby that you'd like to do. I mean, one of my hobbies is being an editor for Back to Godhead. So that's my devotional hobby. And also things that I write. And it's interesting, Srila Prabhupada in Bhagavad Gita 2:47, in the purport, he says there's ordinary activities, emergency, and desired. So ordinary, what we normally have to do to live and so forth in our regular service. Emergency is emergency. And desire would be a hobby. Have a devotional hobby. Maybe it's making flower arrangements for your deities, or learning embroidery, or, learning bhajans. Or I know devotees who take the Sanskrit and Bengali bhajans and write them in English. Right? I'm sure many of you are familiar with Dravida Prabhu. So that's what he does. His ordinary work is he works for the BBT, he's an editor and so forth. But that's his hobby. It's his devotional hobby, that he takes the slokas and he turns them into poeticized English. And then he sings them. Right? I know a number of people who have hobbies like this. So some kind of devotional hobby. A lot of people have some preaching program that they do as hobbies. And they may do it over the internet, or they may have people come to their home, or something like that, where they have some devotional hobby. All right, someone asked me about habits. I said we were going to go over this. So when we're talking about training and an incompatible behavior, we're talking about training a habit. Okay, so this is looking at things from a mundane perspective, but the habit we want to replace it with should be Krishna conscious. So this is a whole science. We really are not going to get into the whole science in just 5 or 10 minutes. But just to give you an overview, whenever we have a habit, there's what's called a reminder or a cue, then the habit itself, and then the reward. The reward is what we talked about with the rasa. We are always getting a reward. Okay? If you don't identify the reward, you can't change the behavior. But the next thing that you want to look at is the reminder, the cue. What is it that starts that behavior pattern? So it might be a particular time of the day. Maybe you start noticing, every day at 4 o'clock, I go eat some potato chips. Or it could be a particular emotional state. You might say, whenever I'm really tired, I turn on some stupid comedy show and watch the Three Stooges. What's triggering it? What's triggering it? If I feel, am I getting angry at my kids when I feel they're being insubordinate, which is a little different just than I'm trying to correct their behavior for their own sake. So what's my cue? And that cue can be the behavior of somebody else. It could be a particular time of the day. It could be a particular place. Certain behavior is triggered by a particular place. It could be certain environment that we're in, or certain other people. It could be a certain state of mind. It could be a certain state of emotion. Does this all make sense to you? Maybe there's certain things we do particularly when we're sad, certain things we do particularly when we're angry. They tend to be what we would call the more negative emotions that may trigger, or if we're sick, or we're in pain. You understand? Does this make sense to everybody? Or maybe when we've completed a project, we've finished something really difficult, and we feel, I finished something really difficult. now I'm going to reward myself by eating this thing or watching this thing or doing this thing. So it could be that kind of thing. Or it could be, all right, I finished my rounds, I read the Bhagavatam, all right, I did my Krishna consciousness, now I can give myself some nonsense. It might be, I've seen people do that. I've really seen people do that. Actually, Prabhupada told Sri Dhikar to do that. He said, finish my 16 rounds, now I can do any damn thing. And there's, okay, all that tapasya, all that austerity, now I get to reward myself. Okay, computer game, here we come. Finish my rounds, leave me alone. So that could be that, finish my schoolwork, finish my rounds, or finish my day's work or whatever. So these sort of things can be a cue or a trigger. Now, this takes a little bit of detective work for something, especially deeply ingrained habits. And then what you want to do is use the same cue to trigger another habit that gives you a similar reward. So I was studying about habits, and this one man was saying how he gained a lot of weight because he found out the main thing he was doing was eating a great big chocolate chip cookie every afternoon. And he realized that the trigger was a certain time of the day. It was the middle of the afternoon. And so, he went through the whole routine. What am I doing? All right, I get up from my desk, I go to the cafeteria, I buy the huge cookie, I sit down with my coworkers, I talk for a while, I eat the cookie, and then I go back to my desk. And he thought, well, what's my reward? Is my reward the sugar? Is my reward, something with the cookie itself? Is my reward the friendship? Is my reward taking a break from the job? Is my reward getting some exercise and some movement? What's my reward? And he tried doing, eliminating each of those to see what it was. And he found out the main reward was just taking a break from his work and socializing. So what he started to do was, at that time every day, he would take a break and go visit a coworker and just hang out and talk for 10 minutes and go back to his desk, and he didn't eat the cookie anymore and he lost the weight. So it may take a little bit of detective work. What's my cue? What's triggering me to do this thing? What brings this out in me? I mean, I've sometimes found in myself it's certain kinds of food. That certain kinds of food makes me much less compassionate, for example. Isn't that interesting? Or eating at certain times, or just being tired. If I'm tired, that's probably not the right time to do something really intensive with somebody, because I'm just not going to have the patience, and I'm much more likely to say something nasty to them. Or does that make sense to everybody? And I see that, okay, that's not a good situation. I do something else in that situation. So there's a whole science of how to form new habits, but these are the basic three things. What triggers it? This is especially if you're looking at something that's really ongoing. What is it that triggers it? What do I do? Kind of break down the steps. What am I doing? And then, as we already talked about, what's my reward? What am I getting out of it? So you want to find something that gives you a similar reward, and we're not looking for just another material thing, but look for something that gives you a reward on a real level, on a Krishna conscious level. And how can I use that cue to help me with that? Now, this is an interesting one. And this is called rewarding the absence of the behavior. So this is where you're rewarding yourself just for being not bad. Okay? It isn't rewarding yourself for being good. It's rewarding yourself for being not bad. And we really want to do this in baby steps. Rupa Goswami, Srila Prabhupada, they compare the path of bhakti to a child learning how to walk. That learning how to walk is inherent in the child, and with some practice and some help, they naturally learn how to walk. Now, who here has ever seen a child learning how to walk? Who's seen a child learning how to walk? Okay, so when children learn how to walk, it's not to their accomplishment. And the parents get very excited. They call their relatives, and nowadays they post something on Facebook, and they get really call everybody. She stood up for 2 seconds. And then it may be some time before they stand up again. Maybe in a day or 2 or 3 days before they stand up again. And gradually they stand up and take a step, maybe even taking a step holding on to something, maybe taking a step not holding on to something, and then they may take just 2 steps. And many times babies will plateau. They may just take 2 steps for months and months and months, and then all of a sudden take 4 steps, and then all of a sudden take 8 steps. So it's very incremental. Now, with babies walking, we are talking about a positive thing, not the absence of a negative thing. But we want to look at this as the absence of a negative thing. If you're just simply not doing it. And Srila Prabhupada told Shamasundar this. Any of you have gotten Shamasundar's new book, Chasing Rhinos with the Swami. So one of the chapters like that, he's carving Jagannath deities, and Prabhupada comes to see him, and he finds a cigarette pack on top of the deity. Prabhupada knocks it off, and he said, he just takes off the deity, and he says, decrease by 1 cigarette a day until you've stopped. So, if someone who's smoking 10 cigarettes a day, if they smoke 9, they celebrate. When they smoke 8, they celebrate. Any baby steps to decrease the behavior. And baby steps. What we often feel is, I can't reward myself until I'm perfect. Bad idea. Perfect is too far away. It's too big. It's just too big. And, we have lapses. Yes? Yes. It's just like learning how to walk. Nobody gets upset that the kid falls down. The kid doesn't get upset. The parents don't. Nobody gets upset. Nobody says, you're useless. This doesn't happen. A kid sometimes even gets hurt. The kid's learning how to walk. They may even get bruises. I mean, one of my kids, it wasn't from falling, he kept walking into things. He'd fall into things. But it doesn't discourage them. And they just keep trying, and they just keep working at it. So, and think of what is a reward? What do you like? It can be something small, get some maha burfi from the temple and cut it up into 10 pieces or something, and give yourself a little piece of burfi. Or just give yourself a high five or something. Or have a buddy that, if you have a buddy you can trust with whatever this thing is, and just tell them, hey, I'm down to 8 cigarettes. I went a whole day without watching a horror movie or whatever it is. And something that you can, any little incremental thing that you can celebrate. By the way, this stuff works with other people too. So if you want to try to change other people's behavior, although we're not talking about that today, but that also is true. So if someone else is doing some behavior that drives you nuts, instead of waiting until they're perfect before you acknowledge it, if they're even a little bit better, some acknowledgement, which may just even be smiling at them. All right, this is one that people really, these are things that all these things I'm mentioning are things we tend to resist. I can't reward myself until I'm perfect. This is one of the funniest ones. Here, you intentionally create a cue for the bad behavior. What? Krishna does this. This is in the Shastra. Okay? You want to drink, you can drink at this time, in this ceremony. You want to have sex, you get married, you have kids. You want to eat meat, you can kill this animal and this. Yes? He takes behavior that he'd like to stop, and he says, okay, you can do it here. You can do it then. Now, first of all, putting bad behavior on cue takes a lot of the pleasure out of it. All right? Because a lot of the pleasure we get out of doing bad things is that I'm doing something bad. So, giving ourselves permission to do something bad takes a lot of the thrill away from it. And the other thing what you do is you put it on cue is you gradually give the cue less and less and less. And again, people don't want to do this because they don't want to give themselves permission to do what they're trying to give up. So one very effective story I can tell you about this, one devotee who talked to me and said, Urmila, I'm really having a problem with television. She said, I'm doing something called binge watching, which evidently means that you watch practically every waking hour that you possibly can watch. She said, I'll go to the morning program, chant my rounds, have something to eat, and then the rest of the day, I'm just simply watching television. And I don't know what to do. She said, every once in a while I stop, and then it starts again. And then she said to me, Urmila, I will absolutely do whatever you say. And she said that to me in the past, and she said that to me in the past about some pretty heavy things. So I had confidence that she meant this. And by the way, when someone says to you, I'll do whatever you say, that's a pretty heavy burden of responsibility that's on you. It's not something you take lightly. And I thought, well, if I said to this lady, she's a very wonderful, very sincere devotee. If I said to her, okay, absolutely no more television, I thought, I don't know if she can do that today. If I say that, she might fail if she's having such a serious problem. So I said, okay, what about, do you think you could, I didn't just order her, I said, do you think you could limit this to 3 hours a week? Could you do that? She said, yeah, I think I could do that. I said, could you also limit it to only watching things that have actual value? No garbage. And I said, I'm not going to tell you what's valuable. I said, you're a big girl, I think she's like 50-something. I said, you're a big girl. You can figure it out. I said, it doesn't have to be spiritually valuable. It could be educational. I said something. It's got to have some spiritual, educational, moral, ethical, something of value. It can't be absolute, total rubbish. So something of value, 3 hours a week. Can you do that? She said, yes, I think I can do that. Within 2 weeks, she contacted me and she said, all of a sudden I had all this free time. She said, I started reading Prabhupada's books and the books of the Acharyas. And I'm just loving it. Thank you so much. And this was about a year ago. She just wrote me about a week ago. She said, you'll be very glad to know the problem is gone. It took a year. But the problem is gone. So sometimes putting the bad behavior on cue is very effective. You can say, okay, I'm just spacing out on the internet. I'm not getting any work done. I'm just 4 hours. I've been just scrolling through Facebook, watching cat videos or whatever, And, okay, so I'm going to let myself look at Facebook for 15 minutes. And I'm going to set a timer, 15 minutes of Facebook. Or I'm going to look at Facebook only between 8 and 8:30. By the way, you can even do this for family arguments. Really, seriously. Really. You can say anything. I know a couple, they were arguing all the time. They went to see a therapist, and then they were getting along as long as they went to see the therapist because they were saving all the arguments for the therapist. But you can really do this. You can say, okay, anything we want to argue about, we can argue between 6 and 7 and 6:30. And we are capable of doing that. Maybe not 100%, but pretty close. If you know that you can argue about it then, you can do this with your mind during japa too. You can say, we will think about that at 10 o'clock. Now then you have to do that, by the way. Otherwise your mind won't accept it. So if your mind's going, 10 o'clock, shh. And then at 10 o'clock, sit down and say, okay, all right, mind. I'm giving you 10 minutes. What do you want to worry about? It's extremely effective. It's much more effective than just always saying no. We don't like that. We talking about rebellion. We rebel against that. No, you're never going to be able to do that again. No, I'm not going to do that. All right. You can do it every Friday from 8 to 8:15. Okay. All right, now this one is related to the other ones, and this is taking a vow. And I got this from Bhaktivinoda Thakur. I personally found it to be extremely, extremely helpful. And a lot of the other things can be related to this. So you can take a vow, I'm only going to space out on Facebook for 15 minutes a day, or I'm going to watch comedy movies only on Saturday from 1 to 2, or I'm only going to have arguments with my husband from 6 to 6:30 at night, or, or I'm going to substitute this behavior, and instead of watching porn, I'm going to go out on book distribution on Friday nights. Whatever it may be, you take a vow. And I would suggest, Bhaktivinoda Thakur says that first take a vow for 3 days. So I've amended his program a little bit, but his idea was first for 3 days. Now, what I found that I would do is at the end of the 3 days, I would evaluate. Now, you can also use this for completely positive things. Like, let's say you want to read Srila Prabhupada's books more, you want to chant extra or anything like that. You can also use this for that purpose, which is more what we're looking at tomorrow morning. Although I wasn't going to mention vows tomorrow morning. But it can be, I've also used it for strictly positive things. So I've used it to try to deal with negative things that I want to get rid of, and I've used it to deal with positive things, or sometimes a combination, substituting one thing for another. Then at the end of the 3 days, you evaluate it. You say, how did I do? Was I able to do it? And by the way, the mind is willing to do almost anything for 3 days. Even something that you're really attached to and you don't think you could ever possibly give up, you can usually do it for 3 days. The mind say, okay, I can do that. And then you evaluate it. You say, did I like it? Was I happy with it? How easy was it? Do I want to keep doing it? Do I just can't do it right now? Can I do it with modification? One time I read where Burjan Prabhu said he took a vow at Kartik not to criticize anybody. And he said he failed after like 2 hours. So my competitive spirit was roused and I thought, I can do better than that. And so I decided, okay, I'm going to take a vow at Kartik not to criticize anybody. Oh my God, Krishna. It was terrible. And very, very quickly I saw what was happening was Krishna was flagging all my criticism, is basically what happened. He was going, and there, and there, and over 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 there, and over. And I went, okay, I can't do it either. I thought, later, we'll take this vow later, or another. So sometimes you may do something for 3 days and say, I really wasn't ready for that. I really wasn't ready. I've got to do something else to get myself ready for that. Or I need to do it in some modified form. Or, wow, I loved it. It was great. And then either in some adjusted form or continuing, then you can do it I usually do it after 3 days, 2 weeks. And then again, an evaluation. How did it go? And sometimes you can do this for a few things. It doesn't have to be just for one thing. You can have a little list. Don't make it too many things. And after 2 weeks, again, you evaluate it. How did I do? Did I like it? And sometimes you say, wow, I love this. This was great. This was just wonderful. What a difference of quality it made for my life. Wow. And other times it's like, eh. And other times it's like, no, this is not working. And then after 2 weeks, then try making a vow for a month. Now, some people find it's good if another human being walking around on the planet knows about your vows. For some people, you can make it just directly to God. That you have to decide yourself. So then a month, and after a month evaluate, then maybe 3 months. Now, some of the things I've done like that have just become so much a part of my life that I didn't need to do that anymore. Some of them, I love them so much. They added so much to my quality of life. They added so much to my relationship with Krishna that I didn't need any kind of support for it. And some of them served me for a while and then they just weren't relevant anymore. And some of them I did for a while, then I gave it up, and then I really need to do that again. I really need to go back. And it can be a very simple thing, like putting the bad behavior on cue or substituting the behavior or finding where you can get rasa in something else. Now, this is the last one we're going to look at, and as I say, I went from higher to lower. This is the lowest one. This is the one that should be done the most rarely. It always works, but it usually has a very, very high price. It always works, but it usually has a very, very high price. Sometimes it is the proper thing to do. There are some times when this particular method is appropriate. And this is destroy the situation. Take the situation that's full of all these cues and triggers for this behavior and burn it down. Now, the reason that that usually has some very high prices is that you're usually burning down something that also had value. It's like if you burn down your messy house. You know, that's probably not the best choice for not cleaning your house. Because then you no longer have a dirty house, but you also no longer have a house at all. So this solution has to be taken very judiciously. I find that in general, this is the one that people go to first. When people have a problem, they come to you and say, "Can I burn down my house?" And the answer should generally be, no. Don't burn down your house. But occasionally there are times when this is appropriate. When it's appropriate and it's necessary. So changing your ashram, going from brahmachari to grihastha, grihastha to vanaprastha, vanaprastha to sannyas, brahmachari to vanaprastha, brahmachari to sannyas. Making some big change in your ashram. Sometimes that is appropriate. Sometimes the reason we're struggling with something is that we're ourselves not situated properly. That we're not acting in our proper capacity. And this isn't just going from brahmachari to grihastha. It's also going from grihastha to vanaprastha. It's also going from vanaprastha to sannyas. It may be going from brahmachari to sannyas. It's not always going toward grihastha, may be going toward renunciation. Or some change in your living situation. Getting rid of things that you don't use or that are just a problem in your life. If you have things in your life that 99% of your association with them is degrading and only 1% is service, maybe you need to get rid of it. I mean, I was talking in the beginning about sanga. There was a time when Krishna showed me that I was doing something detrimental to my spiritual life, and that the cure was that I had to stop being part of a particular sangha of devotees. Because I could see, although there were many things that were enlivening about that sangha, we were getting some service done, it also brought out some things in me that were not good. And it was with regret that I just say, I'm sorry, I can't be a member of this group anymore, I can't work on this project anymore. And there have been several times that I had to do that. That I just say that this particular situation, it's not a bad situation, but it's a bad situation for me now. That the way I'm dealing with this group, the way I'm dealing with this service is not helpful for my spiritual life, and I haven't been able to find a way to make it so. There's no way I've been able to adjust it. Moving someplace. You know, of course we have a very mobile, transient society in the modern society, but sometimes it may help. I mean, there are times when you go to a different place and different situation, different people, and it does happen that something you may have been struggling with for years and years and years and years and years, and you move to a different situation and it takes care of it. Changing careers. You know, so that can also, but again, this seems to be people's first thing. Why? Because this thing doesn't require any introspection. It doesn't require any humility. It doesn't require any actual deep change. So this is the one people go to when they get stuck on it. I got to get married. I got to get a divorce. I got to get a kid. My kid's got to grow up. I got to get a new job. I got to move to a new temple. I need a new temple president. You know, I got to change something in the externals. So sometimes it is appropriate. But it should really be, it should be something that we don't go to as just our automatic default. All right, and the last one we're going to look at is patience. Krishna consciousness works. Krishna consciousness really does work. Some things just take time. There may be some things that I just have to wait. If I've gone through everything else and I'm still struggling with something, it may just take time. I may not be ready yet to deal with it. I may just have to wait. And as I progress and as I advance in Krishna consciousness, the time will come when I can get rid of it. I don't know if should I tell this story or not. You're going to think this is so silly. Anyway, but it wasn't silly to me. So when my husband and I entered the Vanaprastha order in 96, so I immediately gave my bangles to my daughter. And who did I give my nose ring to? I don't know, one of the girls in the family. And I just started wearing white with borders. But I kept my earrings. Well, I was raised in a family where if you went out without jewelry, you weren't dressed. Yeah, that was how I was raised. Blame my mother, you know. So I just didn't feel right going out without earrings. I felt like I wasn't dressed. There was something wrong with me, you know. So I would wear them, and then I tried to simplify them, and I tried to wear little ones, and I would take them out, and then I would put them back in, and it would go off and on and off and on. And finally one day I said, why am I carrying around these little pieces of gold with me all over the world? But it took me years. It was years. And I just, most of the time I just left it. And every once in a while I look at it and say, I really got to do something about this. And it was actually one particular day when I understood, oh, why am I doing this? And I looked at it and it doesn't bother me at all anymore. But it took years. And you might say, well, that's not much Maya. But it was for me actually at the time. It was something that for me in that circumstance was wrong. And so you're going to think, that's a ridiculous example. But I'm sorry, that was the best I could do. And the only one I was willing to publicly admit anyway. So we may have to sometimes wait for things. It may take some time for us to even see it honestly. I mean, I've also had some things where people told me for 10 years, this is so embarrassing, or 20 years, Urmila, you're doing this thing and it's not good and you should give it up. And I'd think either, oh, you guys are just critical, or it's not a big deal, or something, or, well, it really has some benefit, or I had so many rationalizations. And at a certain point, I saw it for what it was and said, oh my God, these people are right, I shouldn't be doing that. You follow? But I had to be ready. And just, beating yourself up all the time, I got to be perfect today. Good luck with that. Really good luck with that. I mean, on the spiritual level, we're already perfect. It's not something we have to become. But what we're trying to do is we're trying to uncover what's already there. And as we advance in Krishna consciousness, our Maya and our attraction to Maya and our realization for what Maya is will go away by itself. And the things that we can think about this in our life. Is there something I really struggled with 5 years ago or 10 years ago that now I don't even think about? We especially find this if you're trying to preach to people who are they're kind of at a different level than you. And I realized this one time, where in the world was I? Some country in the Middle East. And there was a girl saying to me how hard it was to take up Krishna consciousness because her non-devotee friends were giving her a hard time. And the first thought I had in my mind was, what a petty, insignificant problem. My next thought was, do you remember when for you that was the biggest problem in your spiritual life? And I went, oh my God, there was a time when that was the biggest problem in my spiritual life. Right? When those girls said, come to see the R-rated movie. That was my biggest problem. It was a very big problem. And all of a sudden I realized that was a very big problem for me. And it's now been so gone that I didn't even realize it was gone. I forgot. What I think I said this morning, how, we have a stomach ache and we think, oh, I'll be so happy when my stomach isn't hurting, and then our stomach stops hurting and we forget to be happy. And I think a lot of it's the same way. There's something that's like, how am I ever going to deal with this? Oh my God, it's such an impediment. And when it's gone, we forget that we ever had it. We forget to celebrate. We forget, wow. Like we're all walking, right? We forget how excited we were when we were little babies and we stood up. Like, yeah, sure, I'm walking. Yeah, I'm just walking. So I think if we look back and we think, wow, there was something that was a struggle for me. There was something that was really hard, that was just so difficult. And now it's like breathing. I don't even notice that I'm doing it. And so if I keep on going in bhakti, if there's things I haven't been able to get rid of with any of the other things, maybe I just have to wait. Okay, so here's the list of the things that we went over. What I'd like you to do is take just a few minutes, probably about 5, not more than 10, and look at the list of things and see if there's any of these. Don't pick more than 1 or 2 for right now, but see if there's any of these that you could apply to something on your list. And some of these, of course, could be done in combination. Okay, so if you just work individually and look at your list and you might just pick one for right now. Is there any of these you could apply? Pick one. And pick something that's not going to be that hard. It's a good if you give yourself a victory. You know, pick the easiest one. Don't pick the hardest one. There any? Maybe someone could check to see. Are there any more over there? Are there any extra? If anyone doesn't have one, please raise your hand. So the way our progress is described in especially a book like Madhurya Kadambini is when we get to the platform of steadiness, which means that about 50% of passion and ignorance is gone, when we're about 50% in the mode of goodness. Then although there's still going to be some struggle and some attraction to things which are not good for us, those things are not going to impede us that much. Srila Prabhupada says, until the stage of Nishta, it's a hard struggle with determination, and after that everything comes much more easily. That doesn't mean that there's no more Maya, because Nishta is just 50% mode of goodness. So there's still some passion and ignorance, but it's no longer really affecting you. It's something like, you walk your sled up the hill and then you can sled down. You're still making some effort. You're still steering the sled, but it becomes relatively easy. Until that stage is reached, our progress is going to be unsteady. And there's no particular trick that one can do to be steady before you're steady. There just isn't. People ask all the time, how can I become steady? The answer is you have to come to 50% of the mode of goodness. And we do that by getting rid of these problems. As we get rid of these problems and we come to 50% goodness, our spiritual life becomes much easier. It becomes much more about attraction to Krishna rather than about getting rid of Maya. The focus kind of changes. But no matter how advanced we become in spiritual life, our body and mind is still going to be subjected to the modes of material nature. The question is how affected we are by them and what we do with them. So I thought I would end with this. And this is something that I read in different seminars in different contexts, but I think you'll find it very helpful. So looking at Bhagavad Gita 14:22-25, this is where Krishna gives the symptoms of one who's conquered the modes of material nature. And he says, I'm not going to read the whole thing here. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, O son of Pandu, he who does not hate illumination, attachment, and delusion when they are present, or long for them when they disappear, who is unwavering and undisturbed through all these reactions of the material qualities, remaining neutral and transcendental, knowing that the modes alone are active. Let's look at this again. He who does not hate illumination, attachment, and delusion when they are present, or long for them when they disappear. This is the principle of neither grasping nor pushing away. What we talked about, getting in your actual identity. Looking at the purport, this is just a part of the purport, and I'm only going to read a part of this part. Reading from the third sentence. When a living entity stays in this material world embodied by the material body, it is to be understood that he is under the control of one of the three modes of material nature. When he's actually out of the body, then he is out of the clutches of the material modes of nature. But as long as he is not out of the material body, he should be neutral. Then I'm going to read a section from a book by C.S. Lewis, Screwtape Letters, and this is, if you're familiar with Screwtape Letters, you'll see how I have slightly adapted this. Screwtape is written backwards, so I made it forwards, and I can explain it any further than that. Has no one ever told you about the law of undulation? As spirits, humans belong to the eternal world, but their bodies and minds inhabit time. This means that while their spirit can be directed to an eternal object, their bodies, passions, and imaginations are in continual change, for to be in time means to change. Their nearest approach to constancy, therefore, is undulation, the repeated return to a level from which they repeatedly fall back, a series of troughs and peaks. You can see this undulation in every department of life. Interest in work, affection for friends, physical appetites all go up and down. As long as one lives on earth, periods of emotional and bodily richness and liveliness will alternate with periods of numbness and poverty. One must ask what use God wants to make of the dryness and dullness phase. In God's efforts to get permanent possession of a soul, He relies on the troughs even more than on the peaks. Some of His special favorites have gone through longer and deeper troughs than anyone else. The reason is this: the obedience which God demands is not the absorption of its will into His, but quite a different thing. He wants servants who can become sons. He is full and flows over. He wants a world full of beings united to Him, but still distinct. And that is where the troughs come in. You might wonder why God does not make more use of His power to be sensibly present to human beings in any degree He chooses and at any moment. But the irresistible and the indisputable are the two weapons which the very nature of His desire forbids Him to use. Merely to override a human will, as His felt presence in any but the faintest and most mitigated degree would most certainly do, would be for Him useless. He wants the living beings to be one with Him, but yet themselves. Merely to cancel them or assimilate them will not serve. He is prepared to do a little overriding in the beginning. He will set them off with communications of His presence, which, though faint, seem great to them, with emotional sweetness and easy conquest over temptation. But He never allows this state of affairs to last long. Sooner or later He withdraws, if not in fact, at least from their conscious experience, all those supports and incentives. He leaves the entity to stand up on its own legs, to carry out from the will alone duties which have lost all relish. It is during such trial periods, much more than during the peak periods, that it is growing into the sort of being He wants it to be. Hence, the prayers offered in the state of dryness are those which please Him best. He wants the living being to learn to walk and must therefore take away his hand. And if only the will to walk is really there, He is pleased even with their stumbles. Illusion is never more in danger than when a human being, no longer desiring but still intending to do the will of God, looks round upon a universe from which every trace of Him seems to have vanished, and asks why He has been forsaken and still obeys. So, any questions?
There's a word, undulation.
Like wave. Yeah,
Sorry.
that's fine.
Undulation.
Undulation, to wave. It's a wave. Waveform. Basically, the state of unsteadiness. Any other questions? Yes.
I didn't catch the difference you explained between hobbies and recreation, Mataji.
I don't think recreation is necessarily trying to accomplish something. A hobby, you're still trying to, you have some, you're trying to accomplish, you're sewing a blanket for your deities, you're planting flowers. Recreation could just be you're sitting and singing a song, you know, you're not. I'm not sure if there's a clear and absolute distinction, but because each of them are mentioned, that Krishna mentions recreation and Prabhupada mentions desired activities. Therefore, I've looked at them as two separate categories, but they could be the same thing.
Hare Krishna, Mataji.
Yes.
Could you tell us something about C.S. Lewis? I've never heard
C.S.
of him.
Lewis is a very famous Christian author. He wrote the Narnia books, which you've probably heard of. The Narnia books are they're Christian fables that were written for children to teach different religious and spiritual concepts. So I would say that C.S. Lewis understands very well about neophyte spirituality. He doesn't understand much about higher levels, but he really has a grasp of the beginning levels of spirituality. He's a very, very wise person in that regard. When did he live? I'm not sure. In this century. He didn't die that long ago.
May I ask a question from your earlier session?
Yeah, but let's first see if anyone has a question from this session.
If you want to comment on this for us, how it connects with the Bhagavad Gita verse, and just recap why you put it in here.
Why did I put it in here? Because I felt that it was a very clear explanation of how we should relate to the fact that our bodies and minds are affected by the modes of material nature and what we can do with it. I think there's a tendency to think that getting free of the modes of nature means I rejoice when my body and mind are in goodness, and I hate when my body and mind are in ignorance or in passion. And Krishna is saying very clearly, don't either desire them or hate them. Well, if I'm not going to either desire them or hate them, what am I going to do when my body and mind are in passion and ignorance? I got to do something. You can't just go to sleep every time your body and mind is in passion and ignorance. Some of us would be sleeping a lot. You know, what are you going to do? And I really like the way C.S. Lewis is looking at this. He's saying, you know, when you're not feeling enlivened, when you're not feeling illuminated, basically saying when you're not in goodness, when everything just looks blank and difficult, then you can understand that there's also some spiritual benefit to your going on, even if at that particular moment you don't have a taste. That there's something valuable happening. Because it doesn't feel like there's anything valuable happening. But he's saying there is something valuable happening. And he's saying this is part of the relationship. You know, when I learned how to ride a bike, my father first was holding on to the bike. And at a certain point he let go. And so what C.S. Lewis' point is that sometimes it appears that Krishna is not helping us, and sometimes it appears that he's moving away from us. I give a whole seminar on this called Krishna's Reciprocation, which is based on the Bhagavatam 10th Canto, Chapter 32, where Krishna leaves Rasalila and then returns to the gopis, and he's explaining the relationship that he has with different levels of devotees and how he deals with them. But even if we're not feeling a taste, we're not feeling that Krishna's there, there's some value to going on. There's some value even just to trying. Vaisheshika Prabhu in the morning session was talking about Bhagavad Gita 331. Even if you can't do it, just that you want to do it, which is the same thing C.S. Lewis is saying. Even if you just intend to do the will of God, just the intention. That Krishna is pleased even if we really mess up, but our intention is to please Him and we're trying, even in a state of difficulty. That we can go on and please Him when everything's wonderful. You know, we wouldn't really be addressing the other things that we have to be addressing. No, it doesn't stay like that forever. So I predicated reading this that we do get to a point of nishta where we're not so affected by the modes of passion and ignorance. And someone like C.S. Lewis, I find, can't really go, doesn't seem to be able to go to that platform. He seems to stay. His writings seem to be all below nishta. He doesn't really understand the higher elements. But, I mean, there are some Christian writers that do, certainly. St. Teresa of Avila, and they certainly understand very high levels of Krishna consciousness. But if someone is not yet at nishta, you know, if we're not yet at nishta and we're going through how do we deal with them? How do we see them? How do we see it as mercy? How do we see it as reciprocation from Krishna? That's my intention. Anybody else? Yes.
I feel like we're talking about devotees being more compassionate than Krishna. I like to approach Krishna through devotees, but I find, because I live here and I work with devotees, that's not always the case. And it doesn't matter my intention. Like if I make a mistake, there's a heavy consequence. And I feel it really saddens me, and sometimes I feel discouraged, even in my Krishna consciousness. Like I'm just thinking, here's a devotee, and yes, I have some understanding that they're a human being, but if they act this way, where do I go and find hope?
When we say the devotees are more merciful than Krishna, what we mean by that is that Krishna, in order to give us our free will, takes a position of neutrality. And that the devotees are willing to go out and preach and ask people. That's the sense in which we mean that the devotees are more merciful than Krishna. That Krishna is not going to interfere with anyone's free will. But the devotees will go out and do Harinam, and will go out and give prasadam, and will go out and give books. So in that sense. So I think you're kind of conflating two things that shouldn't be conflated. The person that we're trying to please is Krishna. And only Krishna is able to really understand our intentions. There's no other person, especially a person who's not 100% pure, who's going to understand our intentions. But even those who are 100% pure, there's a difference between God and a jiva. And a jiva. Even a liberated jiva. This is explained in the 4th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, where Krishna says, many, many births you and I have passed, I remember all of them, but you do not. And Prabhupada talks in that purport about the difference between even a pure devotee jiva and God. They're not the same. So only Krishna is in our heart and knows all of our intentions. Krishna responds to our intentions, not the result. Other jivas tend to respond to result and not intentions. They can't see the intentions. They see the result. And often the humans guess at our intentions, and they often guess wrong. Therefore, I find it extremely important, and something that I talk about a lot. I talked about especially in the morning session. Work to please Krishna. Don't work to please anybody independently of Krishna. If you're working to please people independently of Krishna, it means you have the wrong identity. If your identity is, I'm a resident of New Vrindaban and a member of the Hare Krishna movement in 2017, is that going to be true in Goloka Vrindaban? No. So that's not your eternal identity. We might think, oh, well, that's a very spiritual identity. Okay, it's more spiritual than saying I'm an American, but it's not really spiritual. It may be spiritually helpful, but it's not ultimately spiritual. And at a certain point, it's not even frankly spiritually helpful anymore. So an identity, I'm a good sadhaka. I'm a good, loyal member of the International Society for Krishna Consciousness. That may be very helpful at a certain point. But that's not ultimately true either. You understand? It's not ultimate truth. And if the problem with those identities is I can be trying to please people separately from Krishna. I'm trying to prove that I'm a loyal member of a religious organization on the earth planet at a particular... You understand? And it can become not that much different than trying to prove I'm a loyal American or I'm a loyal football fan or something like that. It's very easy for it to become something like that. And as soon as I think I want to be a good something that's not who I am, then I am very dependent on the opinion of other people as to whether or not I've achieved that. I mean, if I want to be a good daughter, well, if my mother and father don't think I'm a good daughter, then I can't think I'm a good daughter. You understand? And it may not only be my parents, it may be my sisters and brothers. They have to think that way too. Maybe my friends also have to think that way. I'm very dependent on other people's opinion of me in order to keep that identity. And so if other people think that I'm not a good daughter, I become very disturbed with them. especially if I have good intentions and I'm trying to be a good daughter. What are they threatening? They're threatening my false identity. But if I think my false identity is myself, I think they're threatening me. I feel like they're like holding a knife to my throat. They're going to cut my head off. Because if that's who I am and what I am, and they're threatening that, I think what really helped me with this is one devotee whose name I will not mention. And I hope you can't even figure out who this is. But there was one devotee I know, and I knew this person for a very, very long time. And for very good reasons. The person did something wrong, and there were good reasons. This person was very much rejected by the Society of Devotees. Not by everybody, but by the society in general. And the person did do something wrong, although the rejection was more extreme than what they did wrong. There wasn't a one-to-one relationship between what they did wrong and how they were treated, although they did do something wrong. Now, this person, though, has gone on in this person's, I don't even want to say what gender they are, in this person's Krishna consciousness. I remember seeing this person actually out of Govardhan. And thought, wow, this person looks happy, they look bright, and they had a service, and they were doing some preaching, and they had devotee friends. And I thought, wow, even someone who was rejected by the Society of Devotees, and for good reason, that did not stop this person's advancement in Krishna consciousness. I was fascinated. And I thought, wow, I'm so afraid of that, because that's like what you're talking about. I'm in a society of devotees, and they criticize me, and even when I have good intentions, and they give me a hard time, and maybe they won't think I'm a good devotee, and maybe they won't like me, and I'm thinking, how can devotees act like that? And it affects my faith, and it affects my enthusiasm. Do we really need the other devotees to certify that we're okay? No, we don't. We really don't.
Isn't that it's sort of coming from the list?
Yes.
As you're talking, I'm thinking, if another devotee says, oh, Nick, you've done something wrong, or we don't like the way that you're doing this piece, then it's the friendship
Yes.
that I'm actually looking at.
Yes. Very good.
I'm not actually serving God or Krishna.
Excellent. I was giving class at 26 2nd Avenue once in New York, and I don't remember exactly what point. But at the end, one lady who was fairly new to Krishna consciousness, she said, so if one of my friends dies, what I'm really mourning is that I've lost my part of identity as being their friend. And all of a sudden I went, yeah. I'm really sorry to say this. We're using others. We're thinking it's rasa, but it's not. I'm using others in order to give myself a particular false ego conception of myself. And when they don't do that, I become very disturbed. When they tell me I'm not a good friend, I'm not a good loyal member of the New Vrindaban community, I'm not a good receptionist, I'm not a good this, I'm not a good that, I become very disturbed. And I think, what kind of a person are you anyway? I thought you were my friend. I thought you were, you're my daughter, you're my mother, we're in the same, or you're a devotee. You're not supposed to treat me this way, but that wasn't ever what it was about. That's not what we're here for, actually. And if we live on that platform, then we become just another religious institution, of which there are already plenty. So many. Now, I understand that the vast majority of us are going to be here to be in another religious institution. I understand that. But let's try as individuals to go beyond that. Let's try to have the person we're trying to please be Krishna. And if I'm filled with that, then my relationship with others is just giving. Then I don't need anybody to certify me as anything in this world. Then I'm not dependent on other people's approval. What does Krishna say? Such a person has no need to do anything and no need to give up anything and is not dependent on any other living being. So I may not be at that point today, and I may not be at that point tomorrow, and I may not be at that point next month, but at least I know that that's where I want to go, and I know that my problem with others are not exactly due to their behavior, although they may have bad behavior, and that's between them and God, and that's not my problem generally. Occasionally other people's bad behavior is my problem, if they're my child or something, but generally it's not. My problem is that I'm not dependent on their certifying me. I'm not dependent on their approval of me. I'm not dependent on their certifying me. And if I'm upset at that thing, it means that I'm still in that space. And then I can step back and say, the real problem is that I'm trying to enjoy rasa by exploiting others in this world. That's my problem. My problem is not how these other people are dealing with me. There's a nice letter from Prabhupada that says, whenever we have difficult dealings with others, it's not due to their lack of Krishna consciousness, it's due to our lack of Krishna consciousness. That doesn't mean that other people's dealings is necessarily all good. You follow? But if it affects my faith, if it affects my happiness, that's because I had the wrong shelter. And that's really more what we were talking about this morning than this afternoon.